taxpayers affected if a company fraudulently gains access to the program and receives a contract or a price evaluation preference?
Well, certainly from a standpoint of this whole issue we're talking about here, they're ripped off from the standpoint of the wrong areas are being stimulated. I mentioned McLean, Virginia. McLean doesn't need any stimulation. McLean's a very wealthy area. Some of you may know, near the Tyson's Corner areas where some of these companies were. The other thing we haven't talked a lot about here is that legitimate Hubzone companies, like in Garrett County, Maryland, for example, may be losing out of business to fraudsters who are taking the business away from them. And from a price standpoint, in some cases, you might be paying more because you're limiting the competition, you're setting aside to a limited number of companies, or you're doing sole sourcing of this thing. So there's a number of reasons where taxpayers are not getting what they paid for. Thank you.
Ms. Carranza, last year, the House passed H.R. 3867. In this legislation, we included a provision to require on-site verification of Hubzone status prior to the award of a second contract. The administration voiced their opposition to this provision, and I quote, "This provision will create a large burden on the Small Business Administration. The firms are already required to certify their status prior to award of a contract." Given the GAO's investigation and the evidence of substantial fraud in regard to the Hubzone program, do you still feel that this will put such a burden on the SBA? And will you continue to oppose on-site verification?
What I am committing to you, Chairwoman Velazquez, is to further assess that situation with the new information that we received, up to including having a contractor come in and conduct an assessment of what it would take to ensure that recertification is
Let me remind you also that that legislation passed overwhelmingly bipartisan support, over 300 votes. Mr. Kutz, to get a library card from the local library, a person is generally required to bring identification as well of a recent bill with a local address on it to prove residency. In your experience, would you say that it is easier to get into the Hubzone contracting program, making one's company eligible for millions of dollars of contracts, than to get a public library card?
I don't have a library card, but given what you said, and back quite a few decades ago when I actually had a library card, showing up and having to prove who you are is more than was required for the Hubzone. So under that scenario, yes, it would require more diligence to get a library card than a Hubzone. And that gets into some of the solutions here to, rather than this being an entirely internet, email-driven process, a little bit more like the site visits we're talking about would be a good step.
Okay. Ms. Carranza, you spoke about electronic annual reviews in your testimony. Can you tell me more about this system?
Yes, this is a, Congresswoman Velazquez, I'm sorry. This is a mechanism that allows individuals, anywhere from the headquarters personnel to the district offices, to perform reviews, site reviews, firm reviews. And it facilitates, simplifies the process. As I indicated earlier, we have reassessed that process because, again, we've allowed technology to manage the process versus the other way around.
So it is exactly this sort of electronic system without verification that has caused the problems with the Hubzone program. Let me ask, Mr. Castro, while you haven't examined this program, can you tell us if you will be concerned about the potential for fraud using this type of annual reviews?
Any system that's predicated on self-certified information without verification and validation is highly susceptible to fraud and abuse, particularly when millions, if not billions, of federal dollars are at stake. We sometimes use the term faith-based contracting, which is essentially a process where we kind of simply sit back and hope and pray that the company we're doing business with isn't ripping us off too badly. this is a situation where if you don't do due diligence and validate that you're getting what you're paying for, that those that you're paying are the ones that purport themselves to be, you are susceptible to fraud. So it does take more than the electronic system. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Ms. Carranza, I just would like for you to explain to us what kind of fraud prevention measures will be put in place to supplement these electronic reviews, annual electronic review, because it by itself will be open to fraud.
Congresswoman Velazquez, as indicated by Mr. Kasu and Mr. Coates, it's about validating and verifying the information that's given, that we are now taking a more stringent and more aggressive manner of doing. If a driver's license was required, or a utility bill for validation or verification of address was allowed, now we will ask for copies of the office lease. Now we will ask for much more in-depth and comprehensive documentation to validate and verify the information that's electronically shared with us.
You're telling me that you're not going to rely only on annual electronic reviews.
Exactly.
Chairwoman, can I
Yes,
comment on
Mr.
that? Because
Coates.
verification is more than getting a copy of something.
Mm-hmm.
When we submitted our first application, they asked us for a copy of our lease. We dummied one up, faxed it to them, and they bought it. So validation means possibly maybe calling the lessor or doing something besides taking a piece of paper and saying, yep, I met the item on the checklist. So I think when we talk about verify and validate at this discussion here, it's more than simply requesting a piece of paper. And that gets back into
the fax machine or emailing.
Especially by fax.
Yeah.
You know, a counterfeit driver's license by fax looks a lot better. It's harder to, you know, with the holograms on a driver's license, if you fax them in, you can't tell if it's a real license or not.
How would you react to Mr. Coates' assessment?
Congresswoman Velazquez, I actually took a couple of addresses and pursued Google Earth. And I believe you're very familiar with Google Earth, where it will zoom in and catch that storefront Starbucks. This is just one of about 9 other type of search engines that we're expanding to ensure that we narrow down the focus of the documentation that's been given to us. So these are going to be expanded search engines. They're going to be consistently utilized. And once again, this is just one of many that will be utilized to verify the information and validate it.
Okay. Mr. Bartlett.